Hey guys, Dr. J here, and we're live. Today, we're going to be talking about tools to revolutionize your fat loss, to make things more objective so you can measure your hormones, see how you're doing. And we're going to talk about fat loss from a root cause hormonal perspective. Lots of people don't do this. I'll dive in and I'll show you my little tips and tricks that I use myself and with patients too. Before we dive in, please smash that like button, really helps the search algorithm. And I'd love to see your comments down below. All right, so let's dive in. So when it comes to fat loss, hormones play a major role. Hormones are essentially the air traffic controller. As nutrition or calories come into your body, it says, hey, go over here, go over there, right? And so, for lack of better terms, air traffic controller is saying calories. And again, we'll use calories and nutrients interchangeably. Problem with the fat loss world is they look at everything from the bomb calorimeter standpoint, right? The bomb calorimeters, they put like nutrient, or they put calories in this object, in this calorimeter, and it closes up, and they heat that water up, or they heat the calorimeter up, and they see how much calories or heat it takes to raise that 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius, and that's considered 1 calorie. And so it's from this measure of heat. The problem in your body when you take in food, it doesn't work like a calorimeter where you're just burning something and you're seeing how much heat is given. Hormones come as a byproduct of what you eat. And so you have three major macronutrients: protein, fat, and carbs. Each elicits a different hormonal response when you eat. And so hormones will say, hey, go here to the muscle to get burned, go here into the fat to get stored, or go here, go to the liver and get stored. And then that hormonal output starts to shift different enzymes in the body, like hormone sensitive lipase to burn, or lipogenic enzymes to store. And so when we look at calories, we look at it from that bomb calorimeter standpoint. Hey, it's just heat and energy, but we can't. And hormones play a major, major role. So people talk about fat loss, they tend to talk about things from an effect standpoint, not the cause standpoint. So when someone says, oh, well, this person's fat because they took in more calories than they burned, well, yes, but that's the effect, not the cause. And a lot of people, they may not eat a lot of calories on paper, but it locks in the fat on their body so they cannot burn that fat. If I were to sit there and have you eat anything and I hooked you up to an IV of insulin and that insulin was dripping constantly, you would have an inability to burn the fat in your body. You would have cravings nonstop based on the hormones that your body is secreting. And those hormones would also make you tired as well. So one, it would make you slovenly, right? You wouldn't want to go exercise. Two, it would make you crave more sweets. Three, it would decrease your energy, so then you move around less, and then you would repeat the cycle the next day, right? And then it would continue to weaken the metabolism over time. And so when we look at hormones and we look at fat loss, you have to look at the macronutrients, and you have to look at the different impacts on your body hormonally. So protein, you're going to have a little bit of an insulin response, about 75% less than carbohydrate. Carbohydrate, you're going to have an insulin response. Vegetables, non-existent, very, very small amount, non-starchy veg, low sugar fruit like berries, glycemic index around 30, a little bit. Apples, now a little bit more. High sugar fruit, more tropical fruit, higher. And then your starch also is going to be in that moderate to high category as well. And then, of course, fats, you don't really have much of an insulin response at all. Fats and protein together, you actually have less insulin. And then fats and high carbohydrate foods together is the worst, because now you're increasing insulin, then you got lots of fats coming in. So our body's really, really good at storing and not burning. So just keep an eye on that when we deal with those macronutrients, what's happening to your body and how the body is allocating resources. So the first thing we can do is we can look at how our blood sugar responds. They have not come out with a handheld insulin meter yet. So once that comes out, I swear to God, it's going to be amazing. You're going to be able to see how your body's responding in real time across the board. Instead, we have a glucose monitor. This one's the Keto Mojo. I like it because it's got a nice app on your phone that hooks up and you can see and graph out your blood sugar readings pre and post meals, and it gives you a nice graph to follow it. So I like it. justinhealth.com/Keto Mojo, KETOMOJO. There'll be a link down below in the reference section of the video. So I like it because it's an indirect measurement, right? It gives you a pretty good correlation. So how it works is when your blood sugar goes up, we can measure that. The higher your blood sugar goes, the corollary is the more insulin we're making, right? The only exception will be like a type 1 diabetic where you don't have that insulin. So more glucose, more insulin to bring it down. Even more glucose, even more insulin. And so the higher your blood sugar goes and the longer it stays up, we're assuming the more insulin problems we have, the more insulin resistance we have. And so we have to look at hormones when we talk about fat loss. So when people say, oh, like, they say this person's gained weight because they have gained more, they've taken on more calories than they burn, right? Well, if I were to look at this theater over there, that theater is packed, right? And I would say, hey, why is that theater packed? So the stupidest answer in the book would say, well, because more people entered that building than left, right? People would look at you and say, what do you mean? Of course it's packed because of that. But why? Is someone playing? Who's the band? Are they giving away free food? What's going on, right? What's the causal element? And it's the same thing. And how your body burns fuel, how it has energy, how you decide what to eat, cravings, all that has a major impact on the hormones in your body. So the first thing we can do, there's a lot of hormones that can be impacted by blood sugar. We can have thyroid issues. We can have female hormone issues, progesterone, cortisol. But the first hormone in that cascade at the very top is going to be insulin. And so it's the first thing I like to look at. Now, when you start to become insulin resistant, can it impact thyroid hormone? Yes, it can. Go to Google Scholar, type in insulin resistance and low T3 or low triiodothyronine. You'll find all kinds of studies. You can type in diabetes and hypothyroidism. There's all kinds of studies showing that the more your blood sugar goes into that pathological range, the lower your metabolism gets. And also too, the more insulin problems you have as a female, you're gonna see more PCOS, more androgenic issues, and you'll also have more problems with your female hormones as you get older with insulin issues. You can you're typically going to create more estrogen dominance, and then when you go into menopause, as your progesterone and estrogen drop, now you're even more insulin resistant because progesterone and estrogen actually help with insulin too. And so when you come menopausal, now you're even in a more difficult position. So lots of women who are in their 20s, they got away with the diet because their hormone profile was healthier. And then as they go more perimenopausal into their 40s, they become more insulin resistant. And what they did in their 20s doesn't work. They have to be more active. They have to have their diet more tightly monitored in regards to carbohydrates and macronutrients. So this is a great way to look at. So first thing we do is, done videos before on this, get your fasting blood sugar measurement. So I haven't eaten a meal yet in about 6 hours, 5 hours at least. My last meal today was... my wife made some peppers stuffed with ground beef and some vegetables. And that was my meal. And so this is a good way. So I want to see my blood sugar fasting below 100. That's a great way to have your blood sugar out of the gate. Now, the key is you want your blood sugar in that first hour, ideally not to go above 120. In some of the diabetic studies, there's one study below, diabetics have their blood sugar in the trouble zone. Once you go above 140 and that's prolonged, that's starting to cause oxidative damage to the bloodstream, to the blood vessels, to the organs. And so in this study, they talked about 140 and higher for 2 hours. Lots of not so good things happen over time. So we want it 140 is the high point in the first hour. In a perfect world, we want it below 120 in the first hour, and we want it below 100 in hour 2. That's a good goal. That tells us we're not making a ton of glucose or a ton of insulin. Again, insulin brings the glucose down. The more glucose you put in our bloodstream, again, carbohydrates break down to glucose typically. Vegetables, very little. Starch, primarily glucose. And then fructose is the worst, right? So you get table sugar is sucrose, which is half fructose, half glucose. And then you have high fructose corn syrup, which is 55-45 fructose to glucose. And fructose is the worst out of them all because of the fact it preferentially goes to the liver to get metabolized and stored, versus glucose primarily goes to the muscles. Now, the muscles have 5 times more reservoir capacity to handle glucose than the liver does to fructose. So you got a 5-time difference. So glucose, easier to handle. Fructose, not so much. And if you're eating processed food, high fructose corn syrup does not create that leptin response in your brain to make you feel satiated. So if you're eating processed food, high fructose corn syrup, you will not have that satiation signal. That's why what you eat, the quality of food, the macronutrients, different. Now, fruit, for instance, not the same. With the pectin that you get in the fiber, you will feel satiation, let's say with berries, and you will also get a bunch of micronutrients. You'll get B vitamins, you'll get some flavonoids, you'll get some potassium, you'll get some vitamin C. So you'll get some nutrients coming in, number one. You'll get pectin slash fiber that will help your gut. It will feed some of the good microbiome a little bit, and it will also make you feel satiated, and you will get a little bit of a leptin response, where with the high fructose corn syrup, you won't. So fruit is definitely different than high fructose corn syrup. Both aren't good if you're insulin resistant, but berries much better. Okay, so blood sugar testing. Let's go do it. Pull the lancet back like this. I like the side of your pinky. just like that. Oop, too much on the front. I'm gonna go more on the meat side here. There we go. Just like that. And again, I like a blood sugar meter better than a continuous glucose monitor. Okay. The reason why is continuous glucose monitor like a Dexcom or a Freestyle Libre 3, they look at interstitial fluid. So you're going to get a delay. So you'll get a much faster reading. Oop, did that not go? I got an error. Bobby. Hey, this is what live TV is, guys. Where we do it. And so you get a much faster reading. So what you eat, testing it 30 minutes, an hour later, you're going to get a much better indicator of where your blood sugar is because of that meal. Again, continuous glucose monitor, if your blood sugar is really high or you're type 1 diabetic and you need that close monitoring, it's fine as a convenience. But I preferentially like these meters better. Okay, good to go. Let's do it again. Trying to do my ring finger. There we go. That should do it. A little countdown here. I'm at 91. So pretty good. I tested my blood sugar today, 2 hours after a meal. I was at 94. So 91 is a pretty good reading. And so this gives you a pretty good idea of how your insulin is. If my insulin was 110, 120, 4 or 5 hours after a meal, that's a pretty good sign that I have significant insulin resistance. The only exception would be is if you just did some sprints or some running, you could have a stress response where your cortisol and adrenaline's mobilizing glucose, but your muscles are active and burning it. So it's not really a big deal. So great indication. So I like to run a fasting. Let's say I'm at 91. I'm going to eat my dinner. So I'll have my dinner and I'll test it tonight. I'm going to have eggs. It's breakfast for dinner. I'm going to do 4 eggs, sunny side up, cooked in butter, and some bacon. And I may do a handful of blueberries for dessert, right? I'll test my blood sugar. I'll probably be around 105 to 110. And then within 1 hour, I'll be back below 100. That's pretty much where I'll be just based on my experience. And so you don't have to do it all the time. But once you kind of test your core meals, hey, this is what a high carb meal looks like. This is what a low carb meal looks like. This is what it looks like after a workout. If I'm sedentary, 15,000 steps. I get about 15,000 steps every day, maybe 20. So that keeps me active. The more active you are, especially even just walking, you get those GLUT4 receptor sites on the muscle stuck up. They're like little fingers and they pull the glucose in. So movement can be very helpful because you're pulling glucose in without having to use insulin. So now you're not having to make more insulin. So you're not having to deal with insulin resistance problems. So movement, walking, great. Again, lifting weights, hypertrophy, bigger muscle equals a bigger sponge. So think about it. If your kid cleans up, if your kid messes up the table and spills some milk, right? If I have a bigger sponge, I can soak it up better. So bigger muscles equal bigger sponge. Plus, when you lift or do any interval training, you're going to get a growth hormone spike that lasts at least 1 day. So research shows 2 30-minute all-out sprints as fast as you can go increases your growth hormone for 2 days. So pretty cool out of the gate. So we really want to work on increasing hormones, and growth hormone can help a lot. Live recording. My kids are here trying to get the dog upstairs. All right. So blood sugar testing. So really important. Looks at insulin. If your insulin's off, guess what's going to happen? Your female hormones will be off. You will either, if you're a cycling woman, you can increase PCOS or androgens. It could increase estrogen dominance as well. If you're menopausal, the lower estrogen, lower progesterone makes you more insulin resistant. So your blood sugar may go off a little bit. And I like it because it's macronutrient diet agnostic. Just test how you're doing. Just see how you're doing. Hey, you're doing this diet, it's going to be bad. Just see how your blood sugar was, see how you felt in relation to your blood sugar. Number 2, if you're a guy too, it's going to increase aromatase. The more insulin you have, aromatase is going to take, with men, it's aromatase, which is testosterone and estrogen. In women, it's going to do the opposite. It's an upregulated enzyme called 17-20 lyase that will increase female hormones to androgens. So hope that helps out of the gates, guys. So in general, blood sugar fasting below 100. 1 hour, I want it below 120. Hour 2, I want it back below 100, ideally. And hour 3, definitely below 100. So give you a pretty good idea. Now, when our insulin is high overall, we can impact adrenaline because when our blood sugar goes up, it can crash down. In the early days when we're not insulin resistant, this crash in blood sugar is called reactive hypoglycemia. When we have a crash, that's going to cause blood sugar issues. You're going to have this adrenaline and cortisol pick your blood sugar back up. It's like you fell down and someone's picking you back up and dusting you off, right? And so you can have cravings and you can have mood issues and you can have jitteriness. And so the more you get your blood sugar to snake along throughout the day and you don't have these prolonged up and down spikes, or if you're insulin resistant, it just goes up and stays up. That's essentially what diabetes or pre-diabetes is. You have it, it's up and it stays up. Pre-diabetes is up and comes down a little faster. Diabetes is up and stays up all day long. So I hope that makes sense. Go way to test it, then you can see exactly what helps. So my suggestions are, number one, protein and fat are important. Protein is very satiating. Fat is very satiating. Fat with protein will time release the insulin you get from protein, and you'll get even less insulin. Carbohydrates, make them more vegetables. Adjust fruit and starch based on your activity level. The more active you are, the more fit you are, the more you're already at a good weight, you can adjust the carbs accordingly. If you're more sedentary, drop it back. If you're more prone to insulin issues or blood sugar issues or weight gain, focus on a 5-minute walk, 10-minute walk after a meal. That can help a lot. That can really help bring that blood sugar down 10, 20%. You can take a look at it, go for a walk, test your blood sugar, see how you do. And it will help a lot. Or even just before you go eat, right? Just bang out 20 jumping jacks or 15, 20 air squats all the way up, all the way down. What you're doing is you get those GLUT4 receptor sites, those fingers up. And then now when that blood sugar comes in, it's going to grab that glucose without having to make an insulin response. So it helps a lot. These are strategies that you can work on that will help. It will, one, assess if these foods are a problem. And then two, give you some ways to mitigate that response as well. And also number three, inflammation makes a big deal too. If I'm eating gluten or I'm eating a food allergen, sometimes you're going to see issues with glucose that aren't even from the carbohydrate or the sugar content of that meal. It could be from the inflammation from that food hitting your guts, having an immune response, and that you can get an inflammatory response that causes a mobilization of glucose, because we know stress hormones mobilize glucose. So it may not even be from the carbohydrate, it may actually be from the inflammation of that food. So really important to keep that in the back of your mind as well, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. So let me recap here. Blood sugar, fasting. We want blood sugar to be fasting below 100. 80 to 90 is a good sweet spot. So before I eat, take my blood sugar. 1 hour afterwards, I want it below 120. 2 hours afterwards, I want it below 100, ideally. 3 hours afterwards, definitely below 100. If your carbohydrates too high, guess what? If blood sugar is too high, adjust carbohydrates. Protein can increase insulin a little bit. So people get into problems, they'll go too high on the protein and they'll be very lean on the fat. And so you really want to make sure that fat's there as well. It's very satiating. Keep your protein between a palm to a fist to a full hand. So in that 4 to 8 ounces of protein is usually pretty good. Make sure there's good fat in there. Adjust the carbohydrates accordingly. It's hard to get too much carbs when you're dealing with leafy greens. It really, really is. Unless you're incredibly insulin sensitive or you're really sensitive to the oxalates or salicylates in those foods, then maybe a carnivore diet may be helpful. And sometimes a carnivore diet can be great because I just recommend it just turn off your brain. Just eat meat. Just eat full fat, healthy meat all week long. Beef, chicken, lamb, pork, fish, just done. Makes it really simple, really easy. So fasting blood sugar below 100, 1 hour below 120, 2 hours below 100, 3 hours definitely below 100. If it's too high, adjust carbohydrate down. Make sure fat's good. 2, go for a 5-10 minute walk after a meal. 3, add an extra blood sugar nutrients. In my line, we have a product called Glucose Energy, but you can look at cinnamon, you can look at B vitamins, you can look at vanadium, you can look at alpha lipoic acid, you can look at magnesium, you can look at gymnema. These are all herbs and nutrients that have a track record of helping to bring blood sugar down. They work on the blood sugar chromium as well, receptor sites, and glycolysis and the Krebs cycle also use those nutrients to process glucose. And so when glucose comes in, you want those nutrients there so we can run that Krebs cycle and pull that sugar in. If not, we end up depleting a lot of nutrients. If we have a lot of processed sugar without nutrients, we end up spending those nutrients to process that sugar. It's like using a credit card with a really expensive transaction fee, right? It's like, ooh, that's a lot. You're using this credit card to spend $1 and you're getting charged $10 in fees. That's kind of what processed food does. So at least with fruit, you're getting a bunch of nutrients, you're getting a bunch of fiber as well, which is much better. So hope it helps, guys. And if you want to dive in deeper, if you have hormonal issues, thyroid issues, if you have menopausal issues, if you have low testosterone issues, low libido issues, and you want to get to the bottom of it, fertility issues. Again, the number one cause of fertility issues in women today is basically PCOS. It's androgen problems driven by insulin resistance. Really, this is the hallmark of it all. If you want to dive in deeper, if you have any issues, there'll be a link down below where you can click to reach out to my staff and team. Happy to help you. We see patients worldwide. If you want more support on this issue, put the blood sugar down below as well, and a couple other resources if you want to dive in there. All right, guys, have a phenomenal night. Take care, y'all.